Marxist in the spirit that got me thrown out of Catholic school. Because I had questioned things, but I always respected people's belief, which is something I don't find about some people who poo-poo people's belief. And we mentioned it with Oriel Lecture. Listen, okay? The language here is in the Middle East, which is an insult. We're talking about Northeast Africa. Okay? And a lot of these panels have nobody that looks African or is from the continent or connected to the continent. And in reference, and I'm going to also say this to the youth, a lot of the struggles out here look like people that don't look like you, and you've been brainwashed not to think highly of them. You could have started a revolution in Haiti, etc., down the line, Jamaica. You don't hear about those struggles, and they're under U.S. imperialism. Nobody said anything about the fact that after that vile earthquake, what landed on the tarmac in Haiti was B-52s. Not the cargo planes with cargo. B-52s carry a cargo, but unfortunately leads further devastation. I didn't hear a certain word that I can't mention because I had one air training in reference to humanitarian aid coming out of the bays of those B-52s, while Clinton stood there. And the so-called Bob Vector movement said nothing.
That's not true.
Not enough, not loud enough. I live in a community, I'm from that community. I feel it. You can't tell me how I'm feeling. Two, in reference to, you talk about...
I can't tell you how you're feeling, but you can't say
Excuse me, I'm not finished. I didn't interrupt you, and I had a lot to say about you, but I'm going to let that go. So please give me the respect. In reference to, you talked about a nation in reference to forbidding strikes. I know a nation where teachers are not allowed to strike, transit workers are not allowed to strike, and it's called the Taylor Law. Sounds like it.
Yeah.
The Taylor Law. Remember the transit workers who went out on strike? Very little support as it should have been from the left. We could have had a revolution in this city. Maybe got rid of the Prince of Darkness that's running the city. Okay? In reference to, you mentioned Libya. It's interesting because it's an African nation, needs an African solution, and unfortunately, the Eurocentric left, when it sees things that it doesn't understand, doesn't know how to deal with it. They own their own homes, they don't pay rent. I would love to see New York get rid of the landlords and own their own apartments. They share in the oil wealth because they all get a check, sharing the oil wealth. Unfortunately, the CIA-sponsored revolution, which is carrying around the King Idris, did not share the oil wealth. Now, is it maybe, you know, he took a bigger cut, maybe he's getting $2,000, $3,000 checks? Fine, but everybody's getting a $3,000 check. And I have the same thing to say.
You're talking about Gaddafi?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to say the same thing in reference to the attitude towards Chavez. I can identify with them there. Came to the Bronx, said y'all are in certain areas of color, said y'all are freezing in the winter, I'm going to cut the price. And again, that's something that the Eurocentric left may not support as well as it should have. That revolution that's going on. Okay? So maybe we need to stop and read Ed Said's book and then come back and have this discussion.
Okay. Thank you. And one more question just to throw in here for discussion.
Yeah. You all mentioned that democracy was a yearning of the people throughout the world. And communism is democracy.
Can you speak right into the mic, sir?
Yes, communism is democracy. And it will fulfill the yearning of the people of the world. But you have to emphasize that it is democracy, is communism, instead of emphasizing that communism is a tyrannical gang of butchers, opportunists, worker capitalists. So, and I want to quote a way, looking for a way, And it's not Mondragon. Mondragon is mostly fascists. They are capitalists. Just mere people fighting for a bigger piece of the pie, you know. Now,
We're kind of losing you here, so.
what I wanted to quote was, what do you think of a left-wing, a communist, Halliburton? Just think of that. Think of the failures of the Paris Commune, the failures of the German Revolution in 18, or whatever it was. And but the 1917 revolution in Russia Trotsky brought over the military. And that was a big difference.
Okay. You've raised the question of what do we think about previous revolutions? And we'll take one more from Platypus.
I wanted to push Laura on one point in relationship to what Laura had said on the basis of clarity versus unity, because I think that Greg, you mentioned, the sort of need for unity, need for what I would call sort of a popular front against a tiller issue, and you mentioned Venezuela, for example, as this place in which one may not stand completely behind its ideals, but nonetheless it is, as you put it, creating a space for the left. And I would actually challenge that. I mean, there's a sense that when Chavez is clearly friendly to Ahmadinejad, the left in Iran, whatever possibility it may have, whatever potential it may have, whatever sort of youth may be interested in leftist ideas, would look to Venezuela as not a friend, but an enemy. And so it just raises a lot of questions, I guess, for me, as to how does one clarify what the left could be if one supports or stands by a government that clearly is friendly to right-wing governments. That's one thing. I think that, sort of to tie it back to this issue of obscurity and misrecognition that Laura was trying to bring up. So, if I understand correctly, Laura, you were talking about how in the present it is easy for us to kind of slip up and start defending rather reactionary right-wing governments because it feels as if that's the only option that we have left, or that we have to make concessions because there isn't a left in the present in order to articulate our ideas.
Can you speak right into the microphone?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, similarly, I would sort of push this idea that in the 1960s it was easier to be a leftist because one could just sort of stand behind the people of Vietnam. I think that the same kind of obscurity that we live in today may have been somewhat there, even in the 1960s, certainly by people themselves in the United States as to what does it mean to be a leftist. And I think that some of the problems that we've inherited today actually come from that type of confusion, that ideological confusion as to what does it mean to be a leftist. Does it mean that you support struggles in a kind of general way? Does it mean that you support the oppressed in a kind of general category? Does it mean that you support anything that stands against U.S. imperialism? Which is why I think that sometimes this sort of framework of against U.S. imperialism, that in itself being a possibility, or something filled with political possibility. The question is how. How are we against U.S. imperialism? In what capacity can a left be created in the U.S. in order to create some kind of political support for real leftist movements in the world that don't actually exist today? So I guess those kinds of questions. And as a last point, I think that we've been talking about the relationship between Islamic fundamentalism and the United States in terms of its sort of military power. I know that we've been sort of saying it's raising a nuclear bomb next to a knife or something, but really the question here is not that, right? As you put it, it's really about, as Samsara put it, it's really about an ideological sort of, maybe an ideology of the right. I mean, Islamic fundamentalism is a way of saying, well, we don't want capitalism to continue to exist, but it's an inadequate response to capitalism. The way in which the United States and U.S. imperialism is, not challenging what capitalism is, and thus is of the right. So yeah, I would just like to phrase this in terms of ideology, sort of clarification and political ideology, and what that means on the left today.
So we'll just hold up, we'll do another group, but I want to ask the panel if you would like to respond to any of the various critiques here of the left, I would say.